Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I am Azriel Dimas Usmadi from class C. I am here to review Old English literature until 18th century literature. The purpose of this video for fulfill the history of the English literature for midterm assignment. For the first one is Old English literature. The oldest form of English literature is Anglo-Saxon or Old English literature. When the Roman Empire withdrew its army from western and southern Britain, the Germanic tribes of English, Saxons, and Jutes invaded Britain. It spans the 7th century of medieval England until 166 when the Norman conquest come to a close. The heroic and elegiac themes in poetry, prose, charms, riddles, maxims, and proverbs are prominent in Old English. Caedmon was a notable author in the Old English era, with works such as Caedmon's Hymn, an English poem about God's worship. Another major work is Beowulf, an English poem that came from the Germanic heroic legend. And the poem tells the story of Beowulf's heroic life from adolescence till his death. The second is the Middle Age, or often known as the Dark Age, was a period that went nearly from the 5th to the late 15th centuries, exactly between the Anglo-Saxons and Renaissance eras, or can even be regarded as a period of transition from classical to the modern times. Poetry, ballads, rhymes, and other sorts of literary works are becoming more popular in this century, as is the genre of romance, which is usually contains remarkable occurrences that will not happen in real life and is usually based on love, chivalry, courtly love, morals, revenge, and religions. The drama began to evolve during this period. It began in the church and employed Latin, but as time went on, it began to be performed in the churchyards and streets. And Latin was gradually replaced by English because many people did not understand it. There are three forms of drama in this era. The first one is miracles. The miracle play, the lives of saints, and the mysteries plays scenes from the Bible, and the last is moralities, play about sin and charity. With the Knight's Tale, one of the 24 stories in the Canterbury Tales, Geoffrey Chaucer was a notable author during this era. And the third is Renaissance era. The Renaissance is a period in European history that lasts from the 14th through the 17th centuries. Following the Middle Age, the Renaissance was a vigorous period of European cultural, artistic, political, and economic rebirth. Classical philosophy, literature, and art were rediscovered throughout the Renaissance. English literature was influenced by the Renaissance and Reformation at the time. There are several characteristics of literary works in the Renaissance era, including telling stories about individuality, death, and morality. William Shakespeare made significant contribution to the Renaissance period. He was not just a writer, but also a proponent of change in Europe culture. Shakespeare modernized pre-Renaissance drama's basic two-dimensional writing style. He concentrated on creating psychologically complex human figures. Perhaps the most famous example of this is Hamlet. And also major works in the Renaissance era are the Mona Lisa and the Last Supper painting by Leonardo da Vinci. The fourth is Revolution and Restoration era. In the decades between 16 and 60 and 1700, the Restoration replaced the Renaissance, probing, exploring, risk-taking intellectual values, laying the groundwork for the emergence of a new sort of society. Restoration era literature will use the heroic couplet as a poetic medium, which is two iambic pentameter lines that rhyme together, and the rise of neoclassicism with a modern soul and outlook, as well as a distinct state of mind within the subject and style. With his famous work Macflecknoe, John Dryden was a major author in this era. Dryden makes fun of a poet named Thomas Shadwell, who is one of his literary rivals, and the poem is significant because it was created as a mock epic, in a quote, a satirical compositions that employed epic forms to discuss mundane topics. And the last is the 18th century literature. Between 60 and 88 and 1789, the Age of Enlightenment occurred in Europe, while the history of England in the 18th century was distinguished by British colonial expansion. The characteristics of 18th century literature are including: the first is the neoclassical poets strictly adhered to the close couplet, with the transitional poets a reaction set in against this tradition, and experiments were made in other kinds of verse, such as the blank verse and the Spenserian stanza. And the influence of Spenser is evident in the fact that over 50 poems in Spenserian stanza were published between 1730 and 75. The revival of the Spenserian stanza can be seen in Thompson Castle in the Lens. Second is return to the nature in the poem. For the example is Cowper's poem. Cowper's poem reflect his simple pleasures, his love of nature, his interest in the lives of the humble and the simple, and his sensibility. Nature was his bad healer, and he anticipates the lake poets in the way he expresses his gratitude. He believed that the country is divine and tone diabolical. The last characteristic is the prominent characteristic of the transitional poets were the return to feeling, strong passion, sentiment, aspiration, and melancholy feelings, The Augustan Post rejects the exhibition of any manifestation of feelings, and their poetry appealed to the intellect rather than moved the heart. So in the 18th century, the 18th century poetry, the major author Alexander Pope was century representative poet, like the Rape of the Lock, the Danciat, Epistle to Dr. Arbuthnot, an essay on criticism, and an essay on men are among the works mentioned. So this is the end of the video. That's it for me. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you.